lovely to be here with you today. I have to say I'm very moved, so forgive me a minute. Well, you know, Unity's my tribe. Unity people are my tribe. And I am usually and often very moved when I come into a Unity Center and find the kind of love and openness that I've experienced here with you today. And Carolyn, thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful story and testament about how Unity has blessed you in your life. I appreciate that so much, and I'm so glad that that is something you're doing in your community. It's extremely important and very valuable. And I want to express my gratitude to John and the board for being willing to bring me here today and introduce me to you and give me some time to share with you some of the things that we have learned over the last 4 or 5 years about transition in Unity communities. And I'll go into that more explicitly in the workshop after the luncheon today. I hope that you can remain for that, because this is important information for your community, we believe. But I want to say that I am just really touched and moved already by this service today, and the really sweet spirit that I recognize and resonate with here today. It's wonderful, wonderful community. Probably the primary story of a group of people making a transition in our Judeo-Christian culture is the story of the Exodus. The Hebrew children, who were the descendants of Joseph and his brothers, had grown and grown and grown, and was really a large part of a large community in Egypt. And because they were immigrants, they didn't have land and the ability to accumulate wealth the way the natural Egyptians who'd been there for centuries did. And so they had to take whatever kind of work that they could get, which was mostly at slave wages or even at various times slavery. And of course, like almost anybody in that situation, some of them wanted to get out of that. They wanted to be free of that. And finally, Moses began to admit that he was one of them and began to step to the fore. But the government did not want to lose such a large pool of cheap labor and resisted that. And you know the story, plague after plague after plague, until finally Pharaoh said, okay, go, and then chased them down, and the Red Sea opened up and then came back again to make it impossible for the soldiers to continue to go. So the Hebrew children were able to escape Egypt and go on to another life. You remember that we're told that they wandered in the desert for 40 years, recognizing that 40 years is a metaphysical term for as long as it takes. It takes as long as it takes. And those numbers and one of those terms are symbols for that. Sometimes even when the situation that we have come from has been bad, it seems better than the unknown that we are moving into or that we don't know about. You know that phrase, the devil you know versus the devil you don't? Isn't it interesting that we think what's waiting for us is another devil? Yeah. So it took as long as it took for them to let go of their life in Egypt and to be willing to risk whatever it was they needed to do in order to have the quality of life that they desired. And finally, everybody who was resistant to creating a new home either died off, or some of them left the tribe and went back to Egypt, or they were able to make that transition. Now, they had their sights on a piece of land that seemed to be just what they needed. It was occupied, however, already by people who had lived there for some time. It's very Old Testament we're talking about here. Moses went up on the mountain, their leader went up on the mountain, and he saw the land, and he could see that it had everything they needed. But he could also see that his time was through. He was done. He said, I'm old now. It's time for God to take me, raise up a new leader for these people, and he disappeared. Again, we know the stories during the years in the desert. the cries of, I want to go back to Egypt. What are we going to do now? We don't have a leader. I don't understand all of this. Who's going to take care of us? Who's going to lead us now? Are you in somewhat the same place? Maybe a little? As I said, I'll talk more explicitly about some of the steps and some of the processes, some of the things that we know are always present in a community when they're making a ministerial transition. So let me ask you this. How many of you just love change? How many of you just love change? Okay, that's about right. How many of you don't really like change at all? Yeah? Okay. And how many of you aren't going to raise your hands whatever I ask? The truth of the matter is that for most of our existence, Unity has not done ministerial transitions very well. For the last 35 years, other denominations have researched and studied and developed some plans and some strategies to assist churches through transition because they've realized what a critical time it is for a church in their own, in raising their own consciousness and the steps that they take next. And about 5 or 6 years ago, those of us who were regional reps began to talk about the impact of transition on spiritual communities and how so often it would lead to very difficult times and very often decline in the church when they went through a ministerial transition. And we began to study the research and methods that had been taught for a long time. And what I discovered, I will share with you. What we discovered, I'll share with you this afternoon. But we know this, that transitions that are not managed well very often lead to very serious declines in communities. So we developed the program and the training so that we would have people who could help communities do that. And what we discovered is just what the research revealed, is that churches who participate in these programs have a better chance of hiring and attracting a minister who is aligned with them so that they can thrive. Now, listen to me, folks. No right and perfect. Get that out of your heads right now. No affirmations for right and perfect minister. One who is aligned with you and can nurture and challenge you so that you can continue to thrive. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is very much about change. And there is one thing that we know. Change is all there is. We are always, always, always changing. We are either changing toward thriving or we are changing toward dying. There is no such thing, really, as stability that is longer than a moment. It is always, always about change. It is a universal truth with a capital T. It's all that there is. It is the way of it. Now, we can wish that it were different if you want to. You can do that. And the wishing only makes us suffer. Change is true for organizations and structures just like it is true for individuals. And the resistance to it is what invites the suffering. And so until we can accept the reality of what is, we close off the channel of spirit in and through us. Until we can accept what is as the reality, we are unavailable to spirit being able to flow through us, through ourselves as individuals and through the congregation in the ways that it would do that for us. God and God alone is our source. It's the law of circulation. We tend to talk about it mostly with prosperity, but it's in all things. God and God alone is our source. My awareness of God is my supply. And that supply flows to us and through various channels. Money may come to us from a job or several jobs or a loved one or an inheritance or whatever. And human love will come through partners and family and friends and spouse or children or parent or whatever. And satisfaction and a sense of purpose through our work and through our volunteer activities and those kinds of things. But what we know about the abundance and the flow is that when one of those channels changes, we have to be open and receptive to the new channel. We have to be willing to let go of the old one. So when we unexpectedly lose a job, we get to see whether in fact we are holding on to that job as channel or may have confused it with source. And as long as we are still wishing we had that job and think that the world has come to an end and oh, what have they done to us by, our not being able to have that job anymore, I can't believe this happened to me, we block the channel through which the flow can come. Now, I don't mean to say that we're going to automatically and instantly rejoice in that the job isn't there anymore, that the relationship has ended, or any of that. Separating from the ties that we had with that job and all that comes with it, the satisfaction, the status, the money, of course, friendships, is a process. It takes a while to work through those kinds of changes sometimes. Separating from our human attachments, whether through divorce or death or moving or long distance or whatever, even losing our minister, is also a process that we move through in one way or another. Stages that we have to go through depending on our ties to that channel that will take a shorter or a longer time. New habits have to form, old ones have to be let go. Now you probably know about the stages of grief. We will experience those stages of grief to one degree or another anytime human relationships are severed or altered. We'll move through them. Now, in a ministerial transition, that will vary. Have you ever heard of using the metaphor of a marriage for the relationship between a minister and a church? You ever heard that? It's kind of like a marriage. Well, we talked about that a lot in ministry. It's a little bit like a marriage, and one of the funny things about the way we do tryouts and interviews and those kinds of things, we have one day, in order to propose to somebody, but that's the way it is. We have to do a lot of trusting the Spirit. But there's some truth in the metaphor, except that we tend to forget that one party has multiple personalities. We don't all experience loss the same way. You have not all experienced the loss of your 3 ministers in these past 3 years in the same way. But it is imperative that we recognize the loss, that we need to honor the time and the processes that serve to allow us to experience all that we need to experience in order to fully release all of that and be whole again and ready to accept a new person in that place. Charles Fillmore said that life is an ever-evolving upward spiral of consciousness. So the spiral, while moving, is circular. We always come back to this same place, but we should come back at it at a new level. And if we are not calling ourselves higher, if we're not willing to change, how will we get to that new level, that higher level? Fillmore also said that enlightenment is of little or no value unless we continue to mature spiritually and emotionally. The song that you sang, Sean, reminded me of a song that was a favorite of mine for a few years. I love myself the way I am, but still I want to grow. The change in me can only come when deep inside I know I'm beautiful, I'm capable of being the best me I can. I love myself the way I am. But still I want to grow. Still I must grow. Still, as important and as wonderful as that enlightenment experience is, I want to continue to mature spiritually and emotionally. And I have to tell you that what I have noticed about my experience is that I tend to notice my spiritual immaturity when it shows up in my relationships and my emotions. I don't know about you, but that's how it shows up for me. And what I've learned that my reactions are very often, if not always, about ego. It's about me wanting my way. It's about me wanting things to be they were. It's about me wanting somebody else to do something the way I want them to do it. And a lot of you, I'm sure, have had an experience of surrendering that ego initially, recognizing that that's something that we needed to do. And some of us have some pretty big egos. I'm certainly one of them. And I realized that surrendering that ego initially was a wonderful awareness experience. But this is what I have learned, unfortunately at the expense of some of my congregants and my family and friends, is that it's not enough to surrender at one time. It has to be done over and over and over and over again. And that the more spiritually sophisticated I get, the more subtle and smart the ego gets. And it will use everything, whatever has happened to me, whatever success, whatever failure, whatever illness, whatever health, whatever wealth, whatever poverty, any experience I've had, it will use it all to get its way. It will use it all. And being aware of that and staying in tune with that and surrendering it time and time and time again is a big piece of my work. Big piece of my work. So we have to stop seeing ourselves as children of God and be willing to step up and see ourselves as men and women of God. That I'm no longer a child of God. I am a man of God. I am a woman of God. Be willing to step up. Sometimes that means structures. What are the structures of our organization that we need to support? What is the spiritual growth that I need to be open to in order to be part of that evolution of consciousness that our spiritual community needs to move through? What are those? So what we offer in the transition process are some processes which will allow some of those things to begin to show up and will allow it to happen. Now, in spite of the title given the talk today, which was Smooth Sailing, I wish I could promise you that, but I cannot. Regardless even of what your board decides, I wish I could. But this time of transition is not necessarily an easy one. The time of transition for the Hebrew children into the nation of Israel was not an easy one. But it can be so rich and so rewarding. So the Hebrew children, as they began to step into their own future, became a mighty nation, and in this upward spiral, on a par with the other great nations of the world, and brought order out of chaos, so that many things that we regard as civilization in our human consciousness evolution came into being during that time. It was incredibly valuable in terms of our own evolution of total human consciousness. So if we can be fully committed to it, it is a time that can transform the congregation and the individuals the individuals in it. But I have to tell you, it's not always easy. And as far as we can see, it is probably far better than the alternative. So what I've long said about marriage is this: it is easier to be single, I know that for a fact, but I believe it is better to be married, to be in committed relationship that requires you to step up every day, that gets you to look at your gaps between your walk and your talk, that lets you see where you're reactive or resistant or falling into habits rather than consciously walking through that relationship and responding rather than reacting, because we can only learn so much for ourselves. Being out in the desert by ourselves is important, and it's an important time for all of us as individuals as we grow and mature to learn who we are. So that's what we're asking you now as a congregation, without a minister, to recognize and learn, who are we as a congregation? Who are we now in this stage, in this level of our evolution? And where do we want to go from here so that we really thrive in this very challenging time for churches? The culture is changing dramatically, and it's a very challenging time for spiritual communities. And so relationship is where rubber meets the road, with one another, with the minister that you finally attract, however that happens. And it is relationship where we get to see the gaps between our walk and our talk. This in-between time, if it is used well, is not a time of waiting for the new minister, waiting to be rescued, whatever that might look like. It can be a very sacred time of questioning, of exploration, of flexibility, of creativity, of change, 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 and more change toward thriving. You may be what some might consider a smaller congregation. You look like a pretty thriving congregation to me. But I've seen congregations just like this, who are willing to make this step and go on to be really thriving groups, really thriving people, to make that choice. And make that choice because you've become a powerful force in forwarding the movement of the spiritual awakening of human consciousness. Not about making sure that this center survives, but a force in the forwarding movement of spiritual awakening of human consciousness. Now, that's something that calls me. Does it call you? It's the only thing I know of that can save the world. Now, I don't know how much you want to grow, and it doesn't matter anyway because Spirit is in charge of that. It does matter that you experience living out of a vision that has purpose in the world. And if you do that, it will attract people. The law of attraction is active and immutable. Until we be who we want to attract, we will not attract who we want. Right? We know that. What will be your choice? Please know that my heart and my prayers are with you as you consciously choose the future before you.